Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Highland. I'm an alcoholic. Because of a very loving and merciful God and a great sponsor and unity with you guys, I've been sober since April 12th of 1990, and that's been a great deal. Thank you. It's really great to be here. I've been fighting a little bit of cold and an allergy all week, so if you hear me graveling a little bit up here, that's what it's all about. But I'll find a way to get through it. And I love being here. What energy is here. It's just so great to be with a bunch of drunks who really are happy about being sober, and I love the topic that you all picked, a great life, because, when I showed up here, and in all honesty, I wasn't so sure what this life was going to be about, and how was I going to live without drinking, and, today I know what a great life is all about, and, I wanted to share something in particular I was thinking about today. I was about 2 years sober, and not having much fun in Alcoholics Anonymous, and, I went to a convention down in Birmingham, Alabama, first AA convention I've ever been to. And the afternoon was kind of dull and boring, and I hung around there, but then this group came in the back, all right, and it was like the Energizer Bunny came into the room, I mean, you could feel this whole group coming in. I said, what is that? And they go, oh, that's Peg Martin and her people. And that night, she got to the podium, I think it was her birthday, and the room just lit up. And I said, that's what I want. That is the life I want. And, you see it here. And if you're new, please pay attention to the joy and the excitement and enthusiasm. Man, it just warms my heart because, I'm not that way. I'm not that way normally. I'd like to thank Bill for asking me, and it's great to be here. I'll just share with you, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love everything about it. My home group is the Lambton Street group, and it's in the inner city of downtown Louisville. I mean, it's down in the hood. It's in the hood. And as a direct result of my home group being down in the hood, probably 75% of the guys I sponsor are African American or black men. I just don't think a lot about it. That's where I hang out, right? Well, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was down that way, and they changed this one-way street to a two-way street. And I'm going to get on the expressway, and pow, I get hit in the rear end. And I get out, and the man that hit me was an elderly black gentleman and his wife, and we're standing in the middle of the street waiting for the police to come. And now keep in mind, I'm only about 3 blocks from my home group. About that time, here come 2 guys down the side of the street, both black. They run over to me. They go, hey, Tim, you all right, man? You okay? I go, guys, I'm all right. Go ahead. About that time, 2 other guys came down the other side of the street, both black. They said, stop, and said, Tim, are you okay, man? I said, oh, guys, go ahead. About that time, car came off the expressway. 5 guys in there, all black. They stopped the car and said, Tim, are you hurt? Can we help you? I didn't think anything about it. I turned around. The elderly black man who hit me was standing there. He went, who are you anyway? What can I tell that guy? I'm just a drunk. Our book says we are people who normally would not mix, and what grows up amongst us is a fellowship that's indescribably wonderful. And it's so true. I'll tell you one quick story. My sponsor's a little guy named Don M. And when I was about 5 years sober, he sent me to Cherokee, North Carolina, to speak at a Cherokee Indian reservation. And I hadn't spoken outside of Louisville, and I was really nervous about going down there. And I get down there, and I'm the only non-Native American speaker, and I do not look like an Indian. And I get up there to speak, and there's the chief sitting there, and there's the shaman guy sitting over here, and I'm real nervous. I don't know what I'm going to say. And the next thing I hear coming out of my mouth is, hey, guys, you know what? When I was a kid and I used to watch those cowboys and Indians movies, pulled for the Indians, I swear I did, And the chief got a little smile on his face. I thought, well, maybe I'm okay here. But after my talk, he came up to me and said, hey, boy, we was kind of worried about you, but when you got up there and told those lies, we knew you was in the right place. Oh, man. You got to love Alcoholics Anonymous. Greatest show on earth. It just cost you $1 to suit up and show up here every day. And I'm certainly glad to be here this weekend. You know, for the new people, if you're new, you know, I want to tell you, I know you're here. And, you know, when I came to these things when I was brand new, when I went to any meeting when I was brand new, what I did, in all honesty, I would sit where you're sitting, I'd listen to the speaker, and I would listen to what he did or she did that I didn't do. You know, I was all about that. I'd be listening and think, well, I did that, and I did that, and did not do that, you know. Next night, next speaker, did it, did not do that. Because I'm thinking I get enough didn'ts, I am out of here. And I'm at a meeting one night, a lady of all things is speaking. And I'm listening to this woman's story, and everything she did, I did. I'm thinking I did that, I'm screwed, I did that too. But right at the end of her talk, she said she used to carry half pint in her bra. I said, I did not do that. I told some old guy about that after the meeting. He said, sound like you're getting a little desperate there to me, kid. And the deal was, like a lot of us, I was kind of figuring out what an alcoholic looked like. You know, dirty old man in a raincoat type of thing, and they weren't there. There was no dirty old men in raincoats that night. You know, there's no dirty old men. Well, there's no raincoats here tonight. Got to keep it honest, But anyway, what happened was I couldn't tell you were an alcoholic by looking at you. But I started listening to your stories because you guys said, Tim, keep coming back to the meetings and keep listening to the stories. And I did. And what I noticed is that no matter what your story was, and there's all kind of crazy stories, as you know. No matter what your stories were, you guys were talking about three things. You were talking about being restless, irritable, and discontent. You were talking about being apart from, not a part of. And you were talking about progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life. And I'm sitting out there going, oh no. If that's got anything to do with what's really wrong with me, I'm in trouble. Because those three things have been part of my life from the get-go. Restless, irritable, and discontent. You heard Peg talk about it this morning. I don't know what it is. I just got it. I've had it since I was a little bitty kid, and some of the most powerful things I hear at our fellowship is when somebody comes up to you and you say, hey, man, how's it going? He goes, I don't know, Tim. I'm just not there, You know what I mean? I go, yeah, I know what you mean. See, I know what you mean. I don't know what you call that, but when I was 13 years old and I put alcohol on that, it took it away, and I never forgot that. Apart from, not a part of. You hear a lot of us talking about that. And even today, almost 24 and a half years sober, there's a little part of me that always wants to separate from the pack. I've gotten to do this quite a bit. I know a lot of people that are here. But on the way over on the airplane, there'll always be this little moment where the little voice will go, Tim, you're not one of them. They will know you're from Kentucky, buddy, there's this little voice that wants to make me different, and I really need to understand, because I heard that's the little piece of us that will kill us. That's the little piece, if I listen to it, that one day you'll look around and Tim will be gone. You talk about that apart from, not a part of thing. I have 8 grandbabies. I love to watch old movies with my grandkids. And my favorite movie of all time was E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Remember that movie? And the reason was back in the 80s when it came out, I was out when that movie came out all drunked up one night on a date with a woman and I think I was engaged to. So that kind of tells you where I was. And but anyway, if you remember in the movie, there's a part of the movie where E.T., the little Martian guy, gets all green, gray, and crinkly. He's drying up. He is dying. But all of a sudden, he looks up in the sky and he goes, home, home, E.T. home. Man, tears just came down my face. This girl I was with said, what is wrong with you? I said, I know just how he feels. And you know what? I could tell that same story in church. Nobody gets it. You tell that in an AA meeting? Oh, yeah, man, I know. I've been trying to get home my whole life, Don't know where that is. Don't know when I'm going to get there, but I knew I wasn't there. And in the last part you guys were talking about that caught me were progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life. Because what I had to realize right away is that I lied when the truth was good enough my whole life. I can remember being 10 years old. And I'd scored 20 points in the game. Came home, you say, how many points you score? I'd say 24, Got to B on the test. What'd you get, Tim? B+, And I can remember thinking, Tim, why isn't the truth good enough for you? Why do you always add to the truth? And, I believe today, if you're a budding alcoholic of my variety, you almost know intuitively that the truth cannot be good enough for you. You almost start to figure out, I need to live outside the truth at a young age. And I understand today why. If you wanted to live the way I wanted to live and drink the way I wanted to drink, then you just had to do that. I was this whole deal about lying. I was 3 months sober, and I was back in my home. And I was sitting up 1:45 in the morning watching The Late Show with my 13-year-old daughter. I couldn't sleep because I was 3 months sober. She couldn't sleep because she's 13, But anyway, she asked all of a sudden, hey, Dad, can I order a pizza? I said, oh, honey, don't do that. Your mother will go nuts. She said, oh, come on, let me. I said, all right, go ahead, She orders a pizza, 1:15 in the morning, doorbell rings, it's the pizza man. Well, here comes her mother, flying out of the bedroom, screaming at her, what in the hell are you doing getting a pizza at 1:15 in the morning? My daughter said, well, Dad said I could. My wife said, you say she could? I said, nope. And my daughter said, Dad, you're lying. I said, I know what I do it all the time. Oh, man. Let me say this. I say all that to say this. Restless, irritable, and discontent, apart from, not a part of, and progressive patterns of dishonesty in my life. Now, see, what I know today, what I didn't know when I showed up here, is what I just described. It's a spiritual malady called alcoholism and everything that goes with it. A disease of body, mind, and spirit. And I need to say that because, I think it's important for all of us to understand there's 12 steps. There's 12 steps for a reason, and that it clearly says, do we need to stop drinking? You bet. And I stopped drinking many times. My problem was I always started again. Because as somebody was talking about last night, or Paul was talking about, I had those little rats gnawing on the wiring in my head. Always. Because I was going to drink again if you had the pain and anxiety that I have. And the good news is that we have a program that gives us a program and a fellowship, everything we need to deal with the whole disease. We have, the physical allergy, and we've got the God of our understanding. Instead of picking up alcohol, then I can call on the God of my understanding. Apart from, not a part of, I got the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all I got to do is drag my raggedy old button here. And this thing about dishonesty, you said, Tim, you do those 12 steps. We promise that you'll understand your truth, you'll be able to accept your truth, and you're going to be able to live comfortable in your own skin. What a good deal. We got it all. We got it all right here. But the bottom line is, we got to take it all. And if everybody around here or anybody around here is like some people around our part, they kind of want to pick and choose what part of the program, what part of the fellowship. We got program people, we got fellowship people, as if you could do one without the other, And it looks like to me the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous is when we took those 12 spiritual principles. And they figured out when one drunk got eyeball to eyeball with another drunk, something magical happened. We were just talking about that because, that's why meetings continue to be so important in my life. No matter how much I think I understand the book and everything, I need to be with you. And I need to listen to you, and I need to bounce myself constantly off another drunk just like myself. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. It wasn't if you were going to drink, it was when and how good were you going to do it, They just did it, and I thought I wanted to do a little bit better than the rest of them. But, the bottom line was, I can tell you, I thought about this one day, alcohol actually worked for me before I ever tasted it. Because my daddy was one of these drunks that if he didn't stop at the tavern before he got home, we knew what was coming through that door. I was the oldest of 7 kids. And I'd be sitting here at the kitchen table, and I'd watch my daddy come in. He looked like the Incredible Hulk. But then he'd reach up in there and he'd get that Yellowstone whiskey and he'd pop him a hit of that Yellowstone whiskey. Then he'd take a beer and knock that thing back, go pop, 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 and his head would go pop. And I'd be sitting there going, man, that felt good. I'm looking at his face going, I don't know what just happened there, but I'm in. I am in, Because I saw immediately, at 10 years old, it did something magical for him. I guess, I had the same feeling already. That I needed something to alter reality just enough to make it okay. And when I got a hold of it when I was 13, it worked just the same way, and I was off and running. What I'll share with you from this point forward is that alcohol, from about 15 years old, would start to take from me everything that would ever mean anything to me. I always find that interesting today because I didn't really care too much about what it did to you, but I was really all about what it did to me because I had hopes, I had dreams, I had aspirations to grow up and be something, you know. And what I can easily say to you, and you'll see as I go forward here, it took all those things. You know, as a 15-year-old, I wanted to grow up and have a home and go to college and be a ball player and live the American dream. Take a drink here. And one of my biggest dreams is when I was a kid was to go to college on a basketball scholarship. Now, not so much here in Nebraska because you guys are all about the ball with the points on the end of it. But in Kentucky, if you can shoot a basketball through a hoop, that's a good deal, right? Because we're all about the round ball in Kentucky, and that's what I could do. And I was an all-state player. My picture was in the paper a lot. My name was in the paper a lot. And the reason I tell you that's who I was. I had no other identity or self-worth at all except I could shoot a basketball through a hoop. So it was big for me. And my one goal my whole life was to get a scholarship to a Division I college. And that dream came true for me in 1966. I got a scholarship to St. Louis University, which it's like a Catholic kid's dream come true because here I get a scholarship to a big-time university that played in the same league at that time with Louisville. Drake, by the way, which is right over in the next state. And it was a big deal because I was the first one in my family to go to college, much less go with notoriety and everything. So my dream was coming true. I left for St. Louis University in 1966. I showed up to the first games of my sophomore year so drunk that the other players kind of hid me on the end of the bench so the coach wouldn't throw me out of school. So this is like going to watch your favorite Division I team, and on the end of the bench, one of the players is loaded, is drunk. And now I'm 18 years old, and here's what I'm telling you. This is the beginning of alcohol moving ahead of everything that I cared about. And I tell you what happened that day. As I looked back and I did inventory on what happened that particular day, two things happened. And they were going to continue to happen to me over and over again. I was walking down the street after class, and the guy said, "Hey, you want to get a drink?" I said, "Well, yeah." I always said, yeah. But my mind always had a rationale of, okay, we're going to go have a couple beers, come back, Tim, you could take a nap, get up, get a shower, go to the game. Hell, Tim, you'll probably be the hero. You know, my mind, and I didn't know anything at that time about a physical allergy, a mental obsession. Certainly didn't know anything about phenomenon of craving, right? And as you guys probably can guess, I drank right up to game time, you know. Nothing more obvious, by the way, than a drunk walking into a sterile men's locker room, you know. The guys, they picked me up pretty quickly, and they took care of me so I wouldn't get caught. The other element of that, though, was the day before, the coach had hurt my feelings. He did. You know, and this was a big thing with me. He said who was going to start, who were going to be the first three substitutes. I wasn't one of them, and it hurt my feelings. You know, in fact, I've come to look at this self-centeredness, Peg, and my thing that I've noticed through my whole life is this. Sooner or later, whether I'm on your team or I'm working with you or I'm married to you, sooner or later, I will start to notice that I'm not getting the respect that a man of my stature should be getting. It's terrible, really. It's awful. In fact, it even happens in AA sometimes. I start noticing I'm not getting the respect a man 24 and a half years sober should get. You know the good thing about AA? Nobody gives a damn. You guys were real clear when I showed up. You said, "Tim, if you want what we have, then come on in, son. But we don't coddle you. You know, if you want to go down and drink, there's a bar at this end, or you can go to another meeting down here. We don't care." You know, thank God for that, because I have this thing in me. You know, we were talking about it all weekend. It's so self-centered. And so that was an element that day, too, you know. And I say that because, again, those two things, that I didn't know the first drink was my problem, and that I had an ego that always led me in that direction. You know, until I came to grips with that, when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, it was never going to be any different in my life. You know, interesting thing happened. I was the second substitute that the guy puts in the game, and this wasn't good. You know, because I'm out there and I'm seeing 3 basketballs. You know, there's about 6 baskets up there. You know, I'm about to throw up. I was in the game for 2 minutes. I got 2 shots at the basket. I swished them both, you know. So not only did I get caught, now I'm like the local hero because I'm the drunk who made 2 baskets, you know. Of course, I'm going around campus telling guys, hey, anybody can hit them when you're sober. Takes a real guy to knock them down when you're drunk. Now, the thing is, it may seem funny now, but that was my big dream. That was my childhood dream. And alcohol that day, that quickly, went right past it. You know, and I'm amazed as I listen to our stories and in my life how quickly alcohol overtakes the things that we care about the most, you know. And that was, and so really from that day forward, alcohol was going to start to dictate on a daily basis what I did, who I did it with, and especially where I ended up on any given day, you know. It was running the show. There's an old guy down in Louisville always talks about alcohol was his friend, it was his buddy. He'd throw it in the back seat. They drove around and have a good time. He said one day he woke up, he was in the back seat. Alcohol was driving, and it was taking him wherever it wanted to go. And from 22 years old on, or actually 19 years old on, that's kind of was going to be my case. Now, of course, I didn't know that, never saw that way, but as I look back on it now, that's exactly what happened. As you might guess, the basketball came to a screeching halt in my junior year. The sad part about that is I didn't even care. I really didn't care. My childhood dream, I walked away from it because I thought I had found a way of life and a whole new exciting, you know, thing that was much better than all of that, you know. I hung around that college campus, and my nickname at that campus was the Vagabond. How's about that for a good name for a 19-year-old? And I got that name because that's kind of how I lived. You know, I might end up at your house, I might end up at your house, I might end up under a tree. You know, the alcohol was starting to dictate on a daily basis what I did and where I ended up. Came down in 1970. I had enough credits. My grades were bad, but I had enough credits to graduate. And they said, well, you got to leave. I said, well, no, I kind of like to keep the party going if I could. You know, it was kind of my idea. Because the problem with 1970, some of you are old enough, you're going to go right there with me. There was a thing called the Vietnam War going on. That wasn't going real great. And they had also a thing called the draft lottery, where they drew your birthday out to see when you're going. My lottery number was 6, you know. I'm in the top 10, you know, I am going. And it was a big deal back then. Some of you know that because, like I said, I'd already had 4 of my best buddies brought home in body bags. The war was not going well, and I certainly would have went, but that wasn't my dream. That's not what I wanted to do. And I found out at that time there were 2 ways you could get deferred from the draft. You could get married. I thought, man, that's awful drastic. Or you could go to grad school. You know, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to grad school. In fact, here was the plan that came through my mind. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you how this came through my mind, except some of you are going to be right with me. So keep in mind, I pretty much have been a street drunk for the last 4 years, but when I came up with the plan, it went like this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the test to get into law school. I'm going to pass that test. I'm going to get into law school. I'm going to graduate from law school. Then someday I'm going to run for Congress and someday President of the United States. You see, guys, it's a short trip from me from street drunk to President of the United States. Crazy. But, you know, as I might guess, I took that test. I got a terrible score on the LSAT, and the law school turned me down. And as meager as it may sound to you all tonight, you know, it was panicky time for me because I thought, Tim, you better come up with a new plan or you're going to be over shooting them up pretty quick. And I'm sitting in a dorm one day, and it comes to me, Tim, why don't you stop drinking? Stop drinking, study for that test, because you got the brains, you should be able to get into law school. For the next 5 weeks, you guys, next 5 weeks, and I had been a daily drinker now for 4 years for sure, and probably previous to that. Next 5 weeks, I don't drink a drop. I find this egghead guy down the hall to tutor me on this test. For the next 5 weeks, he and I sit in this room, and it's awful. I had to get through the shakes. People are out partying. I'm sitting in this room with this egghead guy studying for this LSAT test, right? I gave it the best God gave me for 5 weeks. Came down to the day before the second test. I made a slight change of the plan. New plan was I'm going to go out and have a couple beers so I can relax. Come back, get a good night's sleep, take that test, pass that test, get into law school, Congress, President of the United States. I left that campus on a Friday afternoon for those 2 beers. I didn't get back to the following Tuesday. Found out later on I rode around St. Louis on a city bus on what I now know today is called a blackout. You know, and I say that because I didn't know what a blackout was until I got to AA. I did know. There were many times in my life where I started somewhere, ended up somewhere else with a big chunk of time going, and I just didn't really think about it. But if you think about that, that's insanity in itself. I think God was starting to mess with me a little bit about this time because about 3 o'clock that morning, I realized I wasn't going to take the test, right? And I go back to the dormitory and I find the real smart guy. And I pay him $20 to go take the test for me. And I really, it really bothers me to this day that I even did that. But, it was pretty easy in those days, and he was a nice guy. So he goes and takes the test. I stayed drunk for 3 days. I even forgot he went and took the test for me. About 6 weeks later, we got the results of the test. The guy took in my name. The damn guy got the highest score in the history of the law school. It wasn't very funny then, I'll tell you. I opened that thing up. I forgot whatever was perfect on the LSAT. He missed it by 2 points. So if it was 900, he got 898. I got like 400 on the one I took. So now I got 2 scores over there, 400 points apart. And even I knew, I thought I better get to them before they get to me. And I made an appointment to go see the dean of the law school. And now here I am, 23 years old, Mr. All-State, Mr. Hero Child. I'll never forget this day because I walked into the dean's office and the guy's sitting there. And he never said a word the whole time I was there. And I did the only thing you could do, right? I started to lie. I said, well, Dean, you're probably wondering about the difference in those 2 scores. I said, look, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. I let somebody else take the test as if I didn't know, and I knew he knew I was lying. But what I wanted to share with you, and I don't know why this happened that day, but what went through my mind when I was in that office was, Tim, you know what happened, man. It's the booze. The booze took the basketball out of your life. The booze took the law school opportunity, because you should be doing both of them, and you know it. It was as clear as that to me that day, I don't know why that didn't stick. I don't know even why that happened that day. Because I turned and left that office. There were 2 guys that I know. They said, hey, you won't get a drink? And I said, yeah. That was 1970. It was going to be 20 years until I showed up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But here's what I can tell you for sure. As I look back on it, in those 4 short years, alcohol and alcoholism took from me the very things that I would fight you over today. It took my dignity. It took my sense of self-worth. It took all those things that I so much cherish today that for the last 24 and a half years, you all have helped me get me back. And I say that because sometimes, if you're new, we talk about the things we lose to this disease, and we lose our marriages, and we lose money, and we lose jobs. But you know what we really lose? We lose self. We lose that very human nature of who we want to be, and we want to be somebody and have a sense of purpose in our life. I know we all have it down in there. And alcohol and alcoholism had taken that from me. Because by the time I got back, to Louisville in 4 short years, that had been stripped from me. And I'm going to try to start my adult life and be a husband, be a father, be a worker. I did come home and take the draft physical. I flunked the draft physical on a congenital birth defect. I thought, man, that could have saved me a lot of trouble. But anyway, I came back in a different state, a totally different state than I left. And certainly, as I talk about this, a lot of it I look back on today, and a lot of it I obviously didn't know then. But I came back and I got into teaching and coaching because I did have a degree and I had played ball. And the first job they gave me, I was the dean of students at an all-boys Catholic high school. That means they put a drunk in charge of discipline at this school. That's what they did. I'm going to tell you this quick story and you'll understand why. I was the dean, so you had to check into me in the morning. And I was sitting there one morning, hung over, big old tomato head, just trying to get to 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And this is back in the 70s, right, when all the kids were out in the parking lot hitting a few doobies to get ready for class. I look up this one morning, this kid's got that long hair we had back in the 70s. His eyes were all glazed over, and he was just kind of floating over top of my desk like this. And all of a sudden, he looked down and went, hey, Mr. Highland, you're looking bad, dude. Oh, man. And I think I said something very profound, like, hey, by God, I'm in charge here, don't you forget that. A lot of crazy stories from that period of my life, but let me tell you why I told you that story about that kid that day. This last July, just last month, that kid, he's not a kid anymore, celebrated 29 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's a multimillionaire, developed a lot of property down in Florida. He's a great member of AA down there. I went down there to speak a couple years ago, and he met me at the airplane with his kids. And he said, hey, Coach, come here. He always called me Coach. He said, Coach, look, I ain't never told my kids now how I was. So I'll make you a deal. You don't say anything about me, I won't say anything about you. And one of my great joys in Alcoholics Anonymous, guess where a lot of those boys I tried to teach and coach in the 70s have shown up? Right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've gotten to sponsor a lot of those same guys I tried to teach and coach back in the 70s. And if you ever hear them from the podium, they'll tell you that I'm a lot better sponsor than I was a teacher or a coach. But I say that because my experience, you guys, in this program, God has given me an opportunity to redo almost every area of my life that I fell down as a drunk, and I'm so grateful for that. When I got back also, I got married to my high school sweetheart. You know, we had dated when I was a senior in high school. I went off to St. Louis. She stayed in Louisville to go to college, and so we had one of those, types of relationships on and off because she wasn't there. And bottom line is, by the time that I graduated, it was off. We weren't dating anymore. But however, you heard how I returned home. I had nowhere else to go. I went back to Mom and Dad's house after that law school thing. It turns out I ran into her, my girlfriend from college, and, she was doing very well. She had a nice job. She had a car. She had a beautiful apartment. I fell in love quick, Man, and I got home in August. We got married in November of 1970. All right, hang with me here for a minute. We got married in November 1970. We got divorced for the first time in 1983. We got remarried in 1985. We got divorced again in 1987. We were remarried in 1990 when I got sober. Wait a minute. I'm not done. Hold on. You guys jumped the gun. We got divorced again in 1995. What is that all about? I'll tell you what that's all about, Carolyn. It's about alcohol, alcoholism, and everything that goes with it. I love them, I hate them, I hate them, I love them, If you don't know, and I loved your talk today, if you don't know there's a thing called alcoholism in the middle of any relationship, pretty much an impossible deal. And I really have a deep respect for Al-Anon and what goes with that. Because if there ever was a family disease, you all, this is it. And what you had there were two people who really cared for each other but had no idea, drunk or sober, what they were dealing with. And I can honestly say that. We also had 3 beautiful kids in that marriage, however. If you're a father, I know lots of fathers here, how about having a gift from God that your oldest son's born on Christmas morning? And that was our gift, 1971, 8:45 in the morning. The bottom line was I was supposed to be in the delivery room that morning for that miracle and that gift. And you're probably going to guess. I was in the hospital, but I wasn't in the delivery room. I was in the men's room with my head in the toilet bowl spitting up whiskey. And all I could think about is I got to get out of here and I got to get a drink. I missed the gift that day, you guys. And I need to tell you, I pretty much missed a lot of gifts for that kid, my oldest son, the Christmas baby, and for my other 2 kids. I want to tell you something about the Christmas baby. By the time I got sober in 1990, and I never had a very good relationship with my oldest son, it just started that way. I guess I wasn't there, and that's just the way it was going to be. And he was the last one, to want to forgive me and to make amends. But when I got sober in 1990, he was getting ready to go off to college one day, and I was about 6 months sober, and he's getting ready to leave to go to school. And he said to me, "Hey, Dad, I'd like to talk to you before I leave for school." And of course, I immediately think, he probably wants to tell me how proud he is of me that I'm 6 months sober. And we have our little meeting. I said, "Son, what is it you'd like to say?" And he said, "Dad, I only have one thing to say to you." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Dad, I hate you." I said, "I hate you, Dad. Let me tell you why. I hate you because all you think about is you. Even since you stopped drinking, all you think about is you. Bye." Man, like I was crushed. 6 months sober, you're taking a hit like this? Unbelievable. I made an awful mistake. I took the story out to a bunch of old-timers in AA. They were not kind. Guy said to me, "Tim, you drank for 27 years. You think you're getting credibility back in your life in 6 months?" I was like, "Well, yeah. My idea when I got here, guys, is, hey, everybody, let's call it even, And you know what? Nobody was interested in even. And you know what? It's still not even. And you know what? I just figured out it's never going to be even. You guys have shown me that the deal is to add to these people's life the rest of my life. And then a guy, an old-timer in our Bible, remember a guy named Jack Sullivan. And Jack was one of the old-timers that put it on me. And he said, "Tim, Let me tell you something. You want credibility in your life in AA? I said, yes, sir. He said, Tim, here's how you're going to get it. You're going to get it by not drinking and doing the next right thing one day at a time. Now, see, that doesn't even sound good to me now, you know. But you know what? He was right. You know, one day at a time, and whether we like it or not, our credibility only comes back by acting and doing the things that we have said for so many years and told so many people we were going to do. But I'll tell you this, 8 years sober. I was living by myself, which was common, and the Christmas baby of mine was in Seattle, Washington, and his butt was on fire, and he was in some trouble, and his life had caught up to him. And he called me when he was 8 years sober, and he said, Dad, can I come home? Can I stay with you? 8 years sober. I finally had some credibility in this boy's life, and he came home and he lived with me for about a year. And that gentle healing that you guys promised that I'd get one day at a time was starting to happen. And now I will tell you, here we are, you know, another 14 years later. That kid of mine now, he lives in Louisville. His mom and I helped him set up his business not too long ago. He's an artist. He has 3 beautiful little girls, a set of twins and a little 4-year-old. And he loves every minute, every second that their pawpaws gets to be with those little girls. Now, to share this with you, many of you know what a child of an alcoholic who grew up in an alcoholic home. You know how they are, and you know what happens. They're void of emotion. And I've never heard him say love in his whole life. He's 41 years old. And last Christmas, he kind of cornered me. And in a very awkward way, he said, Dad, I need to say this. He said, you know, I want you to know that I really, really do love you. And I'm really, really glad that my little girls will never get to see you, or hopefully will never get to see you the way I had to see you. You know, and here's what I'm saying, guys, if you're new. You know, I know we want it all back. We want it quickly. But 24 and a half years later, if that's all I get, if that's the only time he ever says, Dad, I love you, that'll be good enough for me, you know. Because, well, I understand it now. He meant it, and it's built on 24 years of being sober and trying to be a good dad for him. You know, I left the teaching and coaching thing, and I think it had something to do. I wasn't getting the respect that a man of my stature should be getting. And in 1980, I went in and started my own business. Every drunk, sooner or later, has to start your own business, right? I started my insurance business in 1980. Let me talk to you about the decade of the 80s. It was not a good decade, you know. Told you I got divorced for the first time in 83, remarried her in 85, divorced in 87, remarried. I got remarried in 90. I was engaged to 2 other women in between time. I was in the nut house 3 different times. I got picked up 5 times for public intoxication. I lived 14 different places. I had 12 different business partners. I got shot at, I got stabbed, and I lost $250,000. And I was thinking, this is going okay. We're always kind of like the last to know, man, you know, last to know. 1982 to 1985, I went through 5 psychiatrists. That was real simple. I kept them until they started talking about alcohol. Started talking about alcohol, fired them, got me a new guy, you know. And New Year's Eve, 1985. Couldn't live drunk, couldn't live sober. Living with Mom and Dad. Used to run into guys I went to high school with. They'd say, hey, man, what are you doing? I said, I'm president of my own company. They say, no kidding, man. Where are you living? Mom and Dad. Yeah. Living with Mom and Dad, New Year's Eve, 1985. You know, the song with the line, the thrill was gone, comes to mind. Because that day, no matter how much whiskey I drank that day, the thrill was gone. And my old buddy alcohol I had met when I was 13 years old, it was no longer a friend. It was no longer working the way it used to work, and I knew it. And that was a scary, scary moment, and a lot of you have been there. And that was my first visit to the asylum. My brother Tommy picked me up and rode me over to our little asylum, which sits up on the hill in Louisville. And interestingly enough, it's called Our Lady of Peace, which is a good name for... but anyway, they checked me into this place. And I'm going to tell you how I remember the story, because I think it's my alcoholism in a bucket. This nurse, they say, go back in this little room and sit down, and I did. And I was as suicidal as I've ever been. And by the way, we talked about Robin Williams this week and that whole deal. And, every time something like that happens, my wife will usually say, I don't get that. I don't see how that can happen. And I'll go, oh, I do. I understand, because, I think there's a fine line sometimes between us in this room and the people that are on the 6 o'clock news. Just a fine line, and I know that because I've been to that place. And only as a direct result of this program and you people, I have somewhere to go when I get to that place. But anyway, that particular night, I was at that place, but I didn't know what to do with me. I didn't even know how to kill myself. But this nurse sat down next to me, and she said, well, honey, tell me about it. I said, okay, I'll tell you about it. My first wife left me 2 years ago for no reason that I can think of. My family, they're idiots. I mean, they really, really are, And my business partners, I have to do it all by myself. And, I just started ripping this stuff out. I don't know where it came from. I got feeling better as I kept sharing. She didn't look so good after a while. But maybe I'm there an hour and a half. I do remember this. She looked me right in the eye. She said, well, honey, you certainly have a right to feel the way you do. I thought, God, lady, you were so right. What the hell was I thinking? If people like you messed over you like they messed over me, by God, you drink and be depressed too. I hadn't been there 2 hours and I was cured. I spent the next 28 days in that hospital trying to help everybody else. I did. I thought God had sent me there on a mission. He made me head of the stress class. I got a blue ribbon for the best ceramic in the shop. I mean, I thought it was great. And about halfway through that stay, here's how insane it was. I'm walking down the hall, and the nurse says to me, would you like a pass out tonight? I must have thought she said, you want to pass out tonight? I said, what? She said, yeah, if you want to go out for a couple hours, as long as you're back by curfew, it'll be okay. I said, well, thank you very much. Call my best buddy, picks me up from the nut house. We go right to the watering hole. Shoot down, 6, 8 beers, get a couple shots. I bought this big old bottle of wine. I'm telling about all the people I'm helping back to the hospital, We just got slammed, 11:15, curfew was at 11. I said, hey, you got to get me back for curfew. So we get back to the hospital. We're both loaded. I'm stumbling out of this car I look back at him. He's just got tears coming down his face. I said, what is wrong with you? He said, Tim, you do not belong in there. I do. And I think I said something along the lines of, yeah, you know what, I think you're right. And when I get out of here, I will help you. Oh, man, you guys. And you know what I did? I came out of there and I did what I always did. I started over. Got me a new girlfriend, got me a new place to live, got me a new business partner. I was always starting over. And if you listen to our stories in AA, we're the best starter overs in the world. Don't finish much of anything, baby. We can flat start over. Came out of there one time, got back with my most frequent wife, as I call her, and we gave it a good try. We bought a new house, we changed the scenery, we did all the stuff, we do to try to make the disease go away or put it in the closet or do something, and as you know, wherever you go, there you are. And she threw me out again late in 1989. I spent the last 6 months of my drinking living in a guy's basement out in the south end of Louisville. And can't tell you anything miraculous happened there. I can tell you this. April 12th of 1990, I woke up out of that basement embarrassed and realized, hey, I'd lost my family again. I'd lost my marriage. I'd lost on the verge of losing my business, And I went into my office that day. And you guys, my office is a busy place. In the insurance business, the phone rings all the time. People are in and out of the office all the time. April 12th, 1990, I sat down at 7:45 in the morning. I didn't move a muscle for 4 hours till noon. The phone never rang one time that day. Nobody came in the office that day, And the book talks about a moment of clarity, and I guess that's what went on there. Because the only thing I could tell you in that silence, what I knew was, Tim, you know what the problem is. And I reached in my desk drawer, and there was a meeting directory of AA meetings for Louisville that a guy had given me 2.5 years before. It had been there all along. And I went to my first meeting of AA that day. It was a Thursday, and I will tell you that from that day until tonight, I have had a blast. There's been some days in Alcoholics Anonymous where I've laughed harder than I ever thought a guy like me would laugh. But let me tell you this very clearly. I have cried more tears the last 24 and a half years than I ever thought I would. I have felt grief like I was afraid I couldn't handle. And the reason I say that, I heard a guy, and he's sitting in this room tonight named Bob B. And it really hit me was the same thing. I was hoping that this program in sobriety was going to be about the absence of problems in my life. And you guys said, oh, no, Tim, who told you that? Who told you that? He said, Tim, here's what it's going to be. It's going to be about you being part of life and everything that goes with it. And here's the thing, Tim, you're going to get to be part of it in body, in mind, and in spirit. And that really rang a bell because back in the day, my wife would say to me, Tim, you're not even here when you're here. I say, no, I'm here. He said, no, you're not. And you see, what I understand today, very clearly in that book, is that it's a three-pronged disease. And the deal was, with my thing, I was either drinking, I was thinking about drinking, or I was thinking about me. And you know what? That doesn't leave any room for anybody else. And I never realized that the obsession of the alcohol and the obsession of self took me out of being a father, of being a son, of being a friend, of being a husband. Can't do it. Can't do it because I was never present in my own life with the booze in me or without the booze in me. And the reason I know that, I had those 8 grandkids today. And I don't miss a trick. About 3 months ago, there's 3 12-year-olds. And I sit on the floor with them for 3 hours and we played Monopoly. And a guy like me doesn't do that. I couldn't give you 3 minutes of my time and my concentration with 3 12-year-olds. And that's the gift. The gift is being able to be what I always wanted to be, just present as a father, present as a grandfather. I'd have never guessed it, and I say that to you. And those of you who have been around for a while know exactly what I'm talking about. What an incredible gift. What an incredible gift. I'll share this with you. When I first showed up here to the rooms of AA, if you're new, for the first 14 months, I didn't have a sponsor, didn't have a home group, so I certainly hadn't done a step. And somebody was talking about it today. If you'd have ran into me, I was so dry, so irritable. If you'd said, hey, Tim, how you doing, buddy? You happy, joyous, and free? I'd said, yeah, you idiot. What is your problem, man? And I ran into a little guy who became my first sponsor. And I couldn't sleep at night. And he would just tell me, Tim, well, just lay there and go, God is love. God is love. And that's how I went to sleep every night in early sobriety. Still do it sometime today. But I want to tell you, 14 months drier than a bone, God is love was not getting it done. And I thought if I call that little sucker today, he gives me God is love one more time, I'm going to pop him. I am going to get him. And sure enough, I called him with the issue of the day. And sure enough, he said, Tim, just remember, God is love. I said, I know that. But I'm so angry. And I'm so depressed. And he goes, good. I said, what do you mean good? He said, Tim, listen to this. God is, in Alcoholics Anonymous, God is love, but love is action. God is love. Steps 1, 2, and 3, your powerlessness is power. Steps 4 through 9, your simple responsibility to clean up your mess. Step 10 is a good refresher course for you every day. Step 11 hooks you up with your God. Step 12 hooks you up with us. What do you say, Tim? Are you ready? And I said, yes, sir, I'm ready to do something because I cannot live any longer in my skin. I'm either going to kill myself, I'm either going to drink, or I'm going to kill you, one or the other. And that was the day he sent me down to Lambton Baptist Church. And I became the coffee maker down there on Wednesday morning. And that was the day he put me into men's big book group on Wednesday night, which is in my office to this very day. And that was the day I found out the greatest secret in Alcoholics Anonymous. I found out where the fun is. And all of you know this. The fun is in the middle. It wasn't out there on the edges where old Tim was. It's in the middle. It's in here with people like you, coming to things like this, putting on things like this, making the coffee, giving people rides. There's where the fun was. I did not know that. And if you're new, and you're on those edges like I was, come on in. Get in the middle, because from that day forward, I had never been out of the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And pray God that I never will. What a joy it is to be here. I told you when I showed up here, I owed $250,000 to people who really wanted it back. They really bothered me about it a lot, too, and I thought that was unfair. I was trying to get sober after all, and you people, all you think about is money. And in that first 14 months, it was awful. I'd go into my office, and I'd shovel papers from this side to this side. At about 10 o'clock, that anxiety would start shutting me down. That fear would start shutting me down. By 10:30, I was home, crawl up in a ball in my apartment. This was happening about every other day. I'm at a meeting one night, and I'm whining about my business. It's going to bankrupt and all this. And this old guy says, let me see you after the meeting. I said, okay. So he says, tell me about that business. I said, all right. Well, we open at 8 o'clock. He said, good. Tim, you be there at 8 o'clock. Not 8:05, not 8:10. Tim, you be there at 8 o'clock. Okay. What's next? I said, well, I'll go on sales calls. He said, good, Tim, go on your sales calls. What's next? I said, well, I'll go to lunch. He said, good, Tim, go to lunch. And Tim, come back from lunch. I said, I got it. What's next? I said, I come in and do my paperwork. He said, come in and do your paperwork. What's next? He said, I said, well, work's over at 4:45. He said, good, go home. Have dinner with your family. Go to your meeting. Come home. Say your prayers. And then he slammed me with a big one. He said, and Tim, do the same thing the next day. I'm like, wow, what a concept. I mean, like, you do that every day? You do that every day, huh? And see, my sponsor, Don, has since given it a name. He said, Tim, your job, son, is to do the stitches and leave the patterns up to God. You do the stitches every day, Tim, and leave the patterns up to God. And you know, guys, when I have that, I think about stitching. You know, I can't help it. I start thinking about, what is this, a hat, shirt, pants? And God, when am I going to be done? They said, no. You just stitch, and we promise you that the patterns that God comes up with are going to be far better than you'll ever guess. And that's been so true, you all. When I was telling Bob and I had lunch today, and when I can get in the next stitch in my business life, my personal life, even in AA, it's when I'm the happiest. It's when I become the pattern maker, and I step back, seeing how that pattern's going, that things get pretty crazy. I'll tell you a quick sequel to that story about 5 years later. 5 years later now. And so I started doing that, right? And to be honest with you, I thought it was stupid. You know, but I'm getting there at 8, and I'm going on sales calls, going to lunch, coming back from lunch, because I don't have any other choice. But, you know, it's not working. I checked my bank account after 6 months. I still owe $249,600 and some odd dollars. I'm like, this is a slow deal. You know, this is a slow deal. 5 years later, I came in one day. There were 5 phone messages. 4 of them were from AA guys. And the last one was from a reporter at the business paper in Louisville. So I called this lady, this reporter, and she said, Mr. Highland, we'd like to do an article on your business. It's one of the fastest growing of its kind in the Louisville area. I said, wow, that's great. That would be very nice. Thank you. So I said to her, what is it you'd like to know? She said, sir, can you tell me what it was that you did that really turned your business around? Now, I need to tell you, I had 2 things going through my mind. I had this one scenario where I came up with this incredible idea, pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and rocketed this company to success, right? But I said to her, lady, here's the deal. My office opens at 8 o'clock. I get there at 8, and I went right through the whole thing. You know, when I was finished, there's like silence on the other end of the phone. And she said, thank you, sir. We'll see what we can do. And you know what? I knew there was not going to be an article, but I also knew in my heart that I told her the truth. You know, and it's so true today. You know, if I can just ask God for the divine inspiration to find that next stitch every day in my business, the next stitch in my personal life, the next stitch in AA, and it's always there. See, the thing about the stitches, I'm a big deal guy, and the stitches aren't big deals, are they? The stitches are this little bitty steps that they teach us to do in AA. And I'm happiest when I'm doing that. I'll share this with you. You know, we talk about the relationship thing and divorces and marriages, and you know, there was nothing funny about it. You know, getting divorced when you're drunk is one thing. Getting divorced in sobriety is a whole different ballgame. And when I lost my marriage at 5 years sober, I mean, it was painful. You know, because I thought I was working as hard as I could in AA, and I knew she was a good person, but somehow it was bad. It was going very, very bad, and I lost that marriage. And I came to you guys, and thank God you guys always say the same thing. You go, Tim, we don't know, man. We don't know, but just keep helping drunks, you know, and stay on the firing line. I'm sure it'll work out. And I did that, you know. So I got out there helping drunks. And, you know, and one day I thought, man, I don't mind helping drunks, but I'd sure like a partner to help drunks with, you know. I could use somebody who's on the same spiritual path as me, and right in the middle of AA, I should find somebody. And, you know, when you do that, boom, there she was, you know. And I met a lady in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we did the mandatory 3 months dating, and and we got married. And please let me tell you this, and I'm 10 years sober this time, and I think this is the best thing that's ever happened. I mean, I really do. On paper, it looked like one of the best AA marriages you would ever see. You know, she had a bunch of sponsees. I did. You know, both real involved in the program. It was a good paper marriage. We got married. It lasted 8 months. Now, let me tell you, now I'm 10 years sober, and this thing comes crashing down, and there's nothing funny about it. And I'm asking myself, Tim, what is so wrong with you, son? What is so broken in you that you can't have a decent relationship with another person? I came to you guys, and you guys said, Tim, we don't know. We don't know, but you keep doing your work, doing your step work, keep helping drunks, and it'll work out. And I did that. Thank God for that. Thank God. The book clearly tells us that's the one thing, when things are just totally out of control, that we go to. And I did that and went on. And, of course, as you might know, there was a lot to go with that. About a year and a half, 2 years later, I get a phone call one day, and it's the my mother of my children. Remember my most frequent wife? And she said, what you doing? I said, well, nothing. She said, I got the kids on vacation down South Carolina. Do you want to drive down and visit with us? I said, well, sure, I'll do that. And so I drove down there and got a separate condo than they had. And funny thing happened on the way to long-term celibacy and Alcoholics Anonymous. On that trip, for some reason, for the first time, and keep in mind, we've known each other since we were 17 years old, right? Been divorced and married and divorced 3 times by this time. On that trip, for the first time, we started to become friends. We started to become parents and co-parents. And on that trip, for some reason, the walls that had always been there somehow were not as high. There seemed to be more comfort with it. I don't know. Bottom line was, we came back and we worked on that friendship, and we eventually started to date. We had never dated. Never dated. We just jumped in and got married. I'm not a dating guy. I'm a marrying guy. And so we started to date, and once a week I would take her out, and we started to come to know each other a little bit. And then eventually I sold my place, and I moved in with her. And this is a couple years after, about 12 years ago now. And I'm sitting there one day, and she's sitting there, and I looked at her, and she looked at me. I said, well, what do you think? This coming November 28th will be our 44th gross wedding anniversary. I have no idea what the net is, none. Lost my watch somewhere. Thank you. But let me tell you this. I said to Don, is this pretty crazy? He said, well, sure, it's crazy. He said, Tim, but maybe not. Because, if our program's about anything, it's about transformation. And the thing about transformation, we don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to look. And we don't know who's going to be involved. You know why? God transforms. We don't. Isn't that what the 12 steps are all about? It gives us simple actions. And God does the changing. I don't know who it talks about planting the seed. We plant the seed. We keep the weeds away. We water it, but we don't grow it. It grows when God wants it to grow. And I think that has to have happened, you guys, because we're great friends today. She's my buddy, I was telling Bob at lunch today, sometime I look back on that story and go, wow, how could that even have been? But it was. Something happened, and it took a lot of pain, it took a lot of confusion, and I say that because, a little lady in California told me one time, she said, Tim, sometimes when I listen to your story, I think you always thought of your life in periods, but remember, God uses commas. We think in periods, but God uses commas, and I say that because, if anything, whatever's going on in your life and you think you're at a period, be careful. God's got a comma there. The deal is we don't know what's behind the commas, so we stay sober, we show up here, and we help each other get through life. I'll just share this real with you, give you a little insight into my why I had a difficult time with marriages. When I was about 2 years sober, somebody was talking about this. When you get your buddies, when you're 2 years sober, and you got sponsors, but you got to check your sponsors out. So we had 3 of us. We're all 2 years sober, and they were going to help me with my communication skills. Said, Tim, you need to learn to talk to people. That's your problem. Screw you and out of here is not going to get it, So we started working on this. So one guy comes up with, he said, Tim, what you need to tell people is, how can I help? How can I help? He said, that transfers the responsibility to them. How can I help? So I started using, how can I help? How can I help? And pretty soon I said, what happens when you find people don't want your help? And I said, well, you need to tell them, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. So I got, how can you help? I'm sorry you feel that way. And the last guy said, Tim, you need to validate people. Tell them that they may be right. Oh, man, now I got my tools for living. How can I help? Sorry you feel that way. Hey, you might be right. And like any drunk, I am killing this. I am using it at work. I'm using it at home. I am driving it down people's throats, right? I come in from my men's meeting one Tuesday night, just spiritually up there, right? I kind of flew into the kitchen, you know. And I sit down in the kitchen, all hell was breaking loose in there. My wife was yelling at my son was yelling at that. They were all yelling at each other. I was sitting in there in my chair getting ready to do my thing. Before I could say anything, my wife goes, and don't give me that how can you help shit. And of course I said, well, honey, I am sorry you feel that way. And she said, you asshole. I said, yep, you might be right. Oh, man. You wonder why I couldn't stay married, right? And here's the deal. I always have some young guys come up afterwards and go, hey, man, what were those 3 things, you know? If you use them, you're on your own. Let me finish up by telling you, I had those 3 beautiful kids. You know, I had two sons. One of them works with me today, the oldest one you've heard about. And then I had a little baby girl. And my baby girl was her daddy's daughter. And we knew it from the beginning, you know. Her first little phrase when she was a little toddler was, I'll do it myself. Her second little phrase was, you're not the boss to me, you know. And I knew from when she was little. By the time she was 12 years old, I'm finding 6-packs in her backpack. I'm finding half pints in her shoe. You know, I'm chasing her all over the city of Louisville. I'm getting her out of jail for shoplifting. I mean, game is on. She's her daddy's daughter. And let me tell you about this child. She's tall, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful, gifted athlete, probably the best athlete of all my kids. Gifted artist. But she had the disease of alcoholism, and she had it bad. And I knew that all through high school. And she left, I guess, about 14 years ago now and went to the Chicago Art Institute on a scholarship for her art. But I knew she was well into the disease of alcoholism. And she eventually left up there and went to L.A., and she went out there as in performing arts, and that's why, again, I think a lot about this thing when I was thinking about Robin Williams this week. She went out there with the Second City in L.A. and was performing with them. But the bottom line was I knew she was well into this disease, and she was living in her car in the streets of Los Angeles on a liquid diet. And I knew that. And about, I guess, 14 years ago now, 13 and a half years ago, she finally came home. You know, I'll never forget that day because we hadn't seen her in 2 years. And here was my baby girl, beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed. Her eyes were all caved in. Her cheeks were caved in. Her teeth were falling out. She was so thin you could count her ribs. Because in addition to, you know, her alcoholism, she had the disease of anorexia. She only drank. She didn't eat. And I looked her right in the eye. You know, this will never, ever stop amazing me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, honey, is there anything that we can do to help? And she looked right at me and she said, Dad, I am fine. I don't know how we do that. But she got her card. She went back to L.A. And I knew, you guys, it was just a matter of time. A matter of time before the phone would ring. Had to. She couldn't live much longer because her body, if you know anything about the 2 diseases I just mentioned, her body was starting to consume itself. It was starting to eat itself away. About 5 weeks later, the phone did ring one day. The good news, it was her. The bad news is, I knew she was on her last leg because she could hardly whisper. And she said, Daddy, what should I do? And here's what I want to share with you. I'm now 12 years sober. I sponsor tons of guys. I usually don't have any trouble when somebody brings anybody to me and what we're going to do. But I'm going to tell you what, when it's your baby girl and she's 2,000 miles away and you can't get to her, what went through my mind was, hey, Tim, what about the big A&A now, buddy? Good enough for her? And hey, Tim, what about those 12 steps you're always popping off about? Is it good enough for your little baby? And here's the big one, Tim. What about the God you're always bragging about? Is that good enough for your little girl? And I need to tell you in all honesty as a daddy, no, it wasn't good enough. Because everything in me as a daddy wanted to get on an airplane and go out there and find that child and bring her home. But for some reason, when I said to her, honey, here's a man's phone number in Los Angeles, I pray and I hope that you will call him and ask for help. And I hung up that phone and I cried and I sobbed and I cried and I 2 things. One, I figured it was pretty much 50-50 whether I'd go out there and bring her home in a box. But I can also tell you something. It was such a huge moment for me because somewhere down deep I knew I had given her the only thing that I really have to give her. Whether or not I liked it or not, just because of my kid, the only thing that I know that's worked successfully for people like you and me for the last 79 years was started by two guys, one named Bill and one named Bob, right here. And it's the only thing that consistently and persistently has worked for people like me and you, and whether I liked it or not, it had to be good enough for my little girl, you know. So to some extent, no matter what happened, I knew there was no more that I can do. And I'm very, very happy to tell you that this past month, her mom and I did travel to Los Angeles to help her celebrate her 12th year in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to add something to this, and because I know there's some people here who know this guy. And I didn't think a whole lot about this, but he passed away a couple years ago. The man's phone number I gave her, I'm going to use his name because he's passed away, was that man named Scott Redmond. Here's a Jewish man from New York living in California. I think Scott was 25 years sober at that time. And what it dawned on me was, thank God that night. And Scott Redmond lived all the way across Los Angeles from where this kid was. And if you know anything about Los Angeles, it'll take you an hour to get, 2 blocks sometime. But thank God that night, when the hand was reached out and she made that call, for whatever reason, he got in his car and he got to her. Because if he didn't, if he'd have said, honey, I don't have time tonight, or honey, I'm going to have some woman call you tomorrow, or honey, how about if we get together, thank God for some reason he knew that he had to get to her then and now, because if he didn't, I have a different story to tell, and I'll be forever, ever grateful. That night, Scott Redmond did what we're all asked to do, anytime, anywhere. When somebody reaches out, the hand of AA has got to be there. You know the reason I say that? As I get older in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're talking about this today, we lose our energy. I'm more apt to say, I got my favorite game on here. I'll call you tomorrow. I can't, thank God that he didn't take that, position that night. And I'll be ever grateful for that. And that's what I will leave with you tonight. The only thing we're asked to do when we get back, right, to our home groups, is to be there. Be at our sobriety station like he used to talk about. Because somewhere, someday, somebody else's child or grandchild is going to be in that same situation, and one of us are going to have to do the same thing, and I hope we'll do what Scott did. And I'll be forever grateful for that. I want to thank you all for having me tonight. This is a super place, great energy. I love being part of something like this. And as much fun as it is, I'll just tell you this. If you see me kind of slumped up against the wall or not looking too good, just come up and give me a hug, because I'm probably starting to notice I'm not getting the respect of man on myself.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this recording and would like to listen to other talks on recovery, please visit our free website at recoveryspeakers.com. We have assembled the largest historical recovery audio library in the world and are adding new talks each day.